Okay, then we're official. So welcome everybody. I just want to say thanks for sharing where you're from. It's always interesting with a group like this to see exactly how spread out we are. I come to you from the great state of Michigan today, where it's going to be 75 today and 55 tomorrow. So we've had a couple days of really warm weather, which has been great after a hard frost. So we have lots of leaves on the ground around here. So I am currently an educational technology consultant with the Michigan Department of Education. One of the projects that I oversee is the Go Open Michigan OER repository. So I'm pretty passionate about OER, although most of my work is in the K-12 OER realm. But I think we are going to find that we have a lot of similarities. I think we all found ourselves in the same boat, that a lot of educators were not quite sure where they were going to start this fall. And that's one of the likenesses I've seen between higher ed and K-12 probably in a long time. But you'll notice that if you ever get out to our repository, we do have college content there. And I will be talking a lot about higher ed stuff because I have some phenomenal friends in the state that are higher ed. So please feel free to ask questions. Mandy's here to help moderate some of those, and I will try to keep an eye on the chat as well. So we'll just kind of keep going from there. First off, while you've told me where you're from, I want to set the stage for just a minute. So something else, I guess, before we start to set the stage too far, is on the bottom of every slide in this slide deck is a bit.ly link. And that bit.ly link goes to this presentation. So this presentation is openly licensed. You can take it and do what you would like to it and recreate it, remix it, use it as you feel you need to. So feel free to do that, but you can access the slide deck through the bit.ly link. And you might enjoy doing that because there are a lot of links in here and we will have some work time. So you'll want to be able to, it's much easier to click those links instead of having to type the entire thing in. So I want you to assign yourself a 2-digit number. The first digit representing the level in EDU that you represent, whether it be the higher ed university level as ones, 2s are higher ed community college level, and 3 is K-12. Second digit represents kind of your role. I think that we're heavy in these 3 roles, so I only chose 3, not to leave anybody out. But if you're a professor or teacher, second digit is a 1, a 2 is for the library, media, or content experts, 3s are for administrators. And honestly, we're going to use 4s just as that other category. So if you happen to be a cat herder that stumbled across this presentation by pure luck and you've decided that you want to stay and participate, you might want to use 44 as your number. Although I think there are times that some of you probably feel like in your jobs, you're cat herders as well. So I'm going to give you just a minute to give us some numbers and see who we have here. And we seem to have a really nice mix of folks, so that's wonderful. We'll love to connect with some of my K-12 folks at some point, so keep that in mind as well. So as we move on, one thing you're going to see just a few quotes throughout the presentation because I think they really meet the curating piece of this. So quality, relevant content can't be spotted by an algorithm. You can't subscribe to it. You need people, actual human beings, to create or curate it. This resonates with me, and I share this because we have figured out how to map DNA and each day figuring out that subtle changes, what that can mean for people, whether it's a higher predisposal to disease or a sure sign that you're going to become ill with fill in the blank, some type of sickness. But we haven't quite figured out a way to educate every student based on their needs, because educating children is as complex, if not more complex, than keeping us healthy. And I say this because teaching is a hard job and it's very complex. And I want you to know that there are many of us, excuse me, many of us that know that you have a hard job, and we appreciate you for doing it. So this is a big number. And I share this with you because for the state of Michigan, this is our textbook savings since the fall of 2016 at the community college level. Now, I'm not quite sure how that calculates into trees, but as far as money goes, I put on the slide, this is estimating a cost of each textbook at $100. We know that some textbooks are quite a bit more than that these days, and some aren't as much. So they thought $100 was a pretty good middle ground. Letting that number sink in for you. So what is your reason to adopt and curate OER? What is your reason to come to a session to learn more about curation? And on this slide, we talk about typically the three main reasons that I have heard are to save money, to provide some quality, make sure that we improve the quality of our courses, and to provide choice. And while these are great reasons, I would also challenge you to think further about accessibility, equity, and innovation. This may look different to the way you teach things now, to be able to look for diverse perspectives in your coursework. But also, this is something that you typically don't see in your traditional textbooks all the time. Is that improving? I would say yes. But does a textbook always provide and think about the equity and innovation? Are they really innovating your students to want to go beyond what they're learning just in the textbook? Do they want to take it to the next level? You can do that by adding OER content. So I call this the outline that wasn't. This is not necessarily the outline. These are not the steps that you need to necessarily take for adopting OER and curating OER. But these are things that I want you to understand and I want you to think about as you're going on this journey. And this idea was actually, I want to put a shout out to Dr. Tim Clark. I've never met him. He's from the BYOT network. He has created over the years several graphics about curating content, and some of his graphics were the inspiration for me to put some of this information together this way. So I want to give him a shout out as well. So this is going to be kind of the outline of the presentation though. So some of the first things we're going to be working on, we're going to talk about deciding what content needs to be curated. So I'm going to put a link in the chat. Let me grab it here. Again, if you have the presentation open, by clicking on the white circle in the middle of this slide, you will go to the link. And if you need the link, I just threw it in the chat. This is just a really simple way to start your thinking and start your curating and helping to organize yourself. Um, it, if you don't have a planning document, if your institution doesn't provide something like that, you may want to take something like this and tweak it to what your needs are. It does have, I can actually, I've got it up and I'll flip my screen over. So it does have a table in it. And I would almost take this table and recreate more into a spreadsheet, because I think you're going to want more information than just 3 areas for each, for your units and your content. You're going to want the URL, you're going to want, what type of media maybe it is, whether it passes a quality check according to you or your department. So I would adapt what is given here and go with it. But if for today, if you need something just to help to take some notes, this is available for you. So with that, I am going to, their first brainstorm today is deciding what content needs to be curated. So I want you to kind of stick those thinking caps on for just a second. Sorry, I was an elementary educator for about 7 or 8 years. So you'll see a lot of color and you'll hear a lot of probably elementary isms. So let's put those caps on and think about what content needs to be curated. Let me get back over to our presentation. And I'm going to give us a 3-minute timer and we'll be back in 3 minutes. Okay, hopefully that those 3 minutes can go by quick or they can be an eternity. So next quote. OER allows the textbook to support your teaching instead of you teaching to the textbook. And I say it's a quote that I've heard said many times, and I couldn't tell you where it was, where it started. So I just put that I'm quoting someone smarter than me. Wonderful. So as you start to identify the content you will be curating, know that detail helps. Or even as an example, I need maybe in your notes, I need an interactive of the mitosis process. But making those notes to yourself will definitely help as you're putting things together. And you'll get multiple choices of different content for most of you. I'm sure there's some content that it'll be very hard to find, but you can remix and you can take the beauty of OER is that you can take the best or what you feel is the best of several different pieces of content and make it fit for the way you want to teach. Also know that your local assets, those people that you need and those pieces that you need in your local community. And that might be in your local college community, your local K-12 community. Maybe you have a research librarian. Maybe you have an instructional coach or a content coach. Others in your department. I know a lot of higher ed folks have had better results when they do things as a department. But some of you, it sounds like, are in very, very small colleges. So I do have resources coming up later in the presentation. So don't get too off kilter that you're looking for resources. I do share quite a bit of those. We're just trying to lead up to those. So yeah, so detail helps. Keep that in mind. So our second brainstorm time is getting out the calendar. Well, maybe not getting out the calendar, but the planning phase. So with it being November, creating OER for an entire course for second semester probably isn't going to happen. But now's a good time to start thinking of next fall. And even if you are teaching a course right now, it's the perfect time to try pieces out as you find them. So start that time frame planning. So we're going to give you 3 minutes again. And during these 3 minutes, you can start to figure out your time frame. You might want to send that first email to say, hey, I'm interested in getting some OER for my course. You might not know who to email. So you could spend the 3 minutes finding that person that's local for you on who you want to tell that you're interested in starting OER. So maybe search for that example. Some of these reminders and put them on your calendars so that you're keeping it right here in the top of your brain here. So 3 minutes starting now. 30 seconds. Okay, and I'm going to take just a moment and go back over to the chat because some of you have made some really good and necessary points that it's very important to know the content you're teaching, what works and what doesn't work. And even to a step further is what works for students. Because you have many different students in your classes. Teaching it one way may work for 50 or 60% of them. And then you've got your other 40 or 50% that are going, I don't know what we're supposed to be learning there. So having a couple strategies I call it your back pocket, always helps. So yes, absolutely know your content well enough to know what works and what doesn't work. And I know in K-12, we actually encourage teachers that are kind of interested in dipping their toes in OER to look for that lesson that is the hardest for students to understand. And let's find OER in a different way to maybe present that to them. And that kind of gets them started on their OER journey, because I've never had a teacher come back and say that it was a horrible experience. I've always had teachers come back and say that worked and I found an even better way to do that beyond that. So it at least gets them started. Let's see, good. And Paula, I agree that it's essential to, like you say, re-examine our learning objectives and prioritize what's most important. I think we've seen a lot of that since the pandemic started. So as you're going through, so this is something I wanted to, it fit with this slide, because whether you do it as a separate step or you do it as you're looking for your content, you need to assess the content for quality and rigor. So that's something that when I've worked with teachers one-on-one to adopt OER, we did that kind of all at the same time. But I have seen models that it's more of a brainstorm, like, oh, here's content, here's a bunch of it. Let's go maybe back through and see if we can figure out what the quality and rigor is for some of those. I've seen it done both ways. I don't think there's one way is better than the other. I think it really depends on what fits for you. So that's kind of a more personalized solution. So I'm reading all my quotes to you. So I apologize if you don't expect me to. I don't plan on coming in and reading every slide to you, but some of these I really just resonate with me, and I just like hearing the words again. So a curator's job does not involve wizardry, though there are some days you might think it does, but requires a wealth of experience and knowledge, responsibility, and a good overview of artistic developments. But if we are lucky, we curators still manage to enchant visitors with the results. So we've had a couple brainstorming sessions already, and hopefully you're starting to take just a little bit of time today to start to get some ideas down. Maybe some of you are farther along this process than others, and that's okay. So this brainstorm, we are going to determine how the content will be stored, accessed, and sustained. That means, what learning management system or content management system is your institution using? Are there existing library guides or LibGuides? research guides that can help you. I've come across a lot of them a few of them I'm going to share here shortly. Brand new courses may need to look at that understanding by design principle of kind of starting with the end in mind and building it backwards. I hear a lot of people tell me that that's how they do things for a brand new course. Is your course a hybrid of maybe a couple different courses? So you're not looking for just one content area. Maybe you're looking through a couple different content areas and kind of finding the marriage between those two for a course. And while you are curating content, do you need further training? I mean, it's a longer process. So while you're going through this, does it make sense for you to plan and have that training in the system? Whether I'm going to say, I use my acronyms, LMS, the Learning Management System, or the CMS, the Content Management System. I've heard both of them used somewhat interchangeably, so that when you go to teach it, it's smooth and you're comfortable. There's some of that piece as well. And one thing to also keep in mind as you're continuing to build it is, what's it going to look like on a mobile platform? Now, students, I'm going to say hopefully, aren't doing all of their work on a phone, but we all know they're in their pockets all the time, every place they go. If they have a question about a deadline or a question about something that was in the content as they're conversing with other students, they're whipping out that phone and checking it right there. So how does the content look on a mobile device?
Hey, Gina.
Yes.
We had a couple of questions / comments that I wondered if I could just read those to you if you're interested in responding now.
Absolutely.
Okay. Melissa said, one of my concerns is that I can't find an open textbook that mirrors the same content as the one I've been using. I wonder if students would find it annoying to review a ton of different sources that I cobble together rather than having everything in one place.
When I was doing my master's work, Melissa, some of my best, and I'm going to air quote, textbooks were a compilation of pieces that my instructor had put together into a kind of textbook for the course. It meant so much more, and really it kind of drove home the meaning that he was trying to get across. And I say he because the one I had him for several classes, and it really resonated with me that he took the time to really pick out these articles that we were going to discuss, and really got me thinking, and I really appreciated that. So I would say I think your students would appreciate that, unless there was a different context in there.
And we have some great answers in the chat as well, other contributions. Another question, my content area is in the field of medicine, as I am myself a medical student. How would you suggest I get the faculty on board for OER, as they're the main source for content, as well as to advocate for OER?
Oh, that's a really good question. Because in the medical field, I would think that of any place else, you really want to share your knowledge. And I think, I'm guessing, because I'm not in the medical field, that it comes down to time in getting that in print, or kind of out of your brain and into some format that others can consume. And how do you get them on board with OER? I think here's what I'm going to do. So who is it? If you put that question in, please be sure, on the last slide, I have my email address. Please be sure to reach out to me and email me that question as well, because I think we can come up with some ideas. And I just saw it all of a sudden on the chat. I said 9 new messages. So sounds like there's a lot of good chat going on amongst each other, which is awesome. Okay, so, but we are at 3 minutes brainstorm of where do you think your content's going to be stored and how is it going to be sustained? Write down a few notes around that. And we have 3 minutes of a new timer. You'll get to see the time this time. Okay. And I was just responding to Micah. If you don't have a CMS or an LMS, I sold my soul to Google too many years ago. And I willfully admit that. If I didn't have a CMS or LMS to store files, and even if I did, I would probably keep a clean copy of that content in a Google folder. And I say a Google folder because I can make subfolders for each unit. I can organize it the way I want to. Um, yeah, that's probably how I would do it. And maybe some of you have some better suggestions as well. Feel free. And Paula had made a really good comment as well. Let me get to the next slide for a second. Um, so Paula had said, hey, all of a sudden this summer we switched our platform, and she maybe thought that all of that content would always be there. And sometimes switching platforms is wonderful and everything goes just great. It just fits right into the new place. You just learn a few new skills and then you're off to go. And then sometimes not so great. So I would say that. But like I said earlier, test some of the content. If you're planning far enough out, you can test those bits and pieces and see what works and kind of see what doesn't work and really be able to find your niche. So, and as we say, tweak, tweak, tweak. So curriculum is a job that is never ending. There's always something new. There's even with history, everyone says, yeah, right, like history changes. Well, the way we look at history does change. So maybe there's a new way to teach it. Maybe there's a new tool that you want to incorporate into your classroom. Maybe that, so, like I said, the way we look at it based on something that's happening in our world today changes the way you teach it. So, and yes, I hear someone saying press books. That's a super popular choice in higher ed. Hasn't made it to K-12 yet. I'm a little bit jealous about that, but that's okay. So here's the slide that I wanted to, and shout out to these places and not to shortchange any of the great resources that we have in the wonderful state of Michigan. But I asked some friends and said, hey, so in higher ed, where do folks go to find some of your content? This is probably this slide is the reason that you might want this presentation. I don't know. But I tried to get some very different resources in here. So like the Meta Finder, the MOM, the Mason OER Meta Finder, it goes through and searches multiple repositories. So a repository can be big, but it sounds like the Meta Finder is even bigger. So it might be worth taking a look at. Oh, and this slide does not have the resources that I added at the end. So I do have OpenStax. When I looked at our OER report for the Michigan Community Colleges, if you go to that report, the link is on another slide. Download the report, open it up. It actually tells you and shows you this by the discipline, what the course number was, and then if it was an open textbook, who the provider was. OpenStax was very popular in this report. So that's why I brought in OpenStax as resources in my presentation. Not to say that BC Campus and Lumen Learning and all of the other great providers out there aren't worth it. But absolutely feel free to go and check them out as well. So I was going to give you some time to go through these resources. We're getting a little short on time. Let's see if we've got, but we have to start with a quote first. I must emphasize, no matter how obvious it sounds, that good curating depends upon a bottomless passion and curiosity for looking and questioning, and the desire to communicate that excitement. I use this quote in my work for OER as I curate and am able to present about OER, because I think I have a bottomless passion, and I'm really curious as to what is the best stuff I can find that my K-12 teachers will just love and will really fit for every district. That's the hat I wear when I'm looking at this. But yes, you will see, and we're sharing some more resources in, and you guys have all these wonderful LibGuides. Again, I'm a little jealous, but also know that the group that is in this session, you write down some of those names if you want to connect, or say in the chat, I'm interested in connecting. Connect with each other, because that's what the Open Ed Conference is all about, is making those connections and helping each other. So at 12:44, I think I didn't put a timer on the next slide. It just looks like a clock. I can give you 3 minutes to go through, and actually I think this next slide is going to have my extra stuff. To look at resources, this is the slide that has the extra resources. I will give you 3 minutes for extra resources from this slide. Again, if you need the presentation, it's down at the bottom of it. And in the notes for this slide are also all of the long URLs. And I did add BC Campus and Lumen Learning to this slide. Thanks for coming, Paula. About 1 minute. About 20 seconds. And okay, so, from here, I hope you, within each other, if nothing else, have found something that you can use or started getting you thinking about the process, because it's a process to learn and to go through. If you have any questions, you can find me on Twitter. I'm Glow. And there's my email address. I'm lovelessg@michigan.gov. I see Mindy had mentioned something about ISKME, and the Go Open Michigan platform uses the ISKME platform, so we're fans. And we have a microsite and lots of K-12 and some community college content on our Go Open Michigan site. And I also want to thank my friends Kendra Lake, Tina Ulrich, Kelly Clark, and Carl Weckerly. they're the Michigan OER network crew that I put out an all call and said, hey, I got accepted to do curating and I know K-12, but I need a better lens for higher ed. And I got to meet with each one of them and they shared what their experiences have been in the higher ed field of OER curating, which has really helped shape this presentation. Couldn't have done it without them. So kudos and thank you. If you have any questions, we have a couple minutes left. If you want to mic up, I will actually stop presenting and see if anyone wants to throw anything else in the chat or mic up or say anything. I'm game.
Hi, I have a question about reviewing materials. I know how to evaluate materials based on my own disciplinary expertise. I'm a faculty member looking at developing a set of materials for a course that I teach and many other people also teach. And so I know how to do that side of things. And I've been teaching for nearly 30 years, so I've got a general sense of the pedagogical side of things. But in terms of the accessibility, the things that are specific to working with the materials in electronic environments, this is not an area I have expertise in. Are there guides for things like that?
My experience recently has been that we're starting to see more and more like LibGuides being created for digital content. That's a really, really good question because I didn't share any links that would do that. I wonder, I bet you I can put my hands on something that may be able to help you. Did you grab my email address out of that last slide? I'll throw it in the chat.
I've grabbed the entire slide deck.
Okay. I keep seeing people privately. I've tried to send a couple things out to everyone. So just to make sure, I know I have a lot of K-12 folks, but I think something like this in this content area would absolutely help you. So let me see if I can come up with some of those resources and I'll send them your way.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Some people are waiting for that question that's going to open up a whole new world for them. Any other questions? Yes, I see a few of you had put BC Campus, and kudos to BC Campus. I hear through the grapevine that you guys are BC Campus does a wonderful job of making sure that materials are accessible and really address the accessibility, innovative and equity stuff. So yay to BC Campus.